The Institute of Internal Auditors presents All Things Internal Audit. May is Internal Audit Awareness Month, and this year we wanted to celebrate the profession a little differently. Not with a list of frameworks, not with a textbook definition, and not with the idea that internal auditors walk into every room and get thanked for being there, because sometimes they don't.
No one in all my years has ever rolled out the red carpet or thrown a parade when we've shown up. So I just have to be honest.
And yet, internal auditors keep walking into those rooms where people are guarded.
I had to battle with it a lot because I'm one of those people that I like everybody to like me. And so having to deal with the resistance can be tough.
Rooms where the conversation can turn fast.
The stakeholder got up out of his chair and he stormed out of the office. And then I was sort of a newbie in the profession. I didn't really know what to do.
Rooms where the old playbook doesn't work.
AI will not make you a better auditor, but I think emotional intelligence will make you a better auditor because you can use the whole spectrum of human connections.
Rooms where the work is not just about finding what went wrong.
That's really what auditors have is trust, right? That's kind of a byproduct of what we're selling.
And maybe that's the real story of internal audit. Not just the findings, not just the reports, not just the controls, but the real stories from people who have to ask the hard questions, who sometimes have to walk into difficult rooms and do their best to show their organization what they might miss.
We need to position internal audit as a lighthouse and not a spotlight.
You walk into a room and before anyone says much of anything, you can feel it. The crossed arms, the short answers, the polite skepticism. Ashanti Clark knows that feeling. She's now an executive advisor at FedEx Express, and she's seen almost every version of what she calls internal audit resistance.
Oh, where do I even start? Like I have countless stories of this very example. I think what I call IA resistance is very normal when we are engaging with customers. No one in all my years has ever rolled out the red carpet or thrown a parade when we've shown up. So I just have to be honest.
But Ashanti learned something early. If people already expect you to come in with a clipboard of demands, sometimes the strongest move is to do the opposite.
So the specific story I'll share was actually an audit customer that was a vendor. And the thing about, third parties sometimes just are not used to the first party being in their space. So I understood that, but we still had a right to be there. Obviously, part of the agreement is that we, make sure things are on the up and up. So what I decided to do in that instance, because you can feel it. You can feel the tension, you can feel the resistance. And so I just started small. Before I went in with, my clipboard of demands and requesting all this documentation, I just started with a conversation. I just started really trying to learn because they already thought I didn't know anything. So, hey, let's go with that, And so even though I spent hours of research hours and reading policies and reading dashboards and data, I started by giving them an opportunity to teach me something and to share more information than I could, read or research. And so I did allow them to, tell me about their business. I wanted them to feel and understand that I was really there to help them. And then also I gave them a chance after they had kind of, walked through their processes from their perspective to actually talk about what their challenges were with even being in business with us. And so I think that really kind of caught them off guard because I think they assumed that I would come in, with a bias. And so it really helped me to build that trust with them. So I allowed them to talk. I allowed them to share. I asked them what their pain points were in the process. And so I don't think they were expecting that. I think they thought that I probably wouldn't care. But this did allow me to show them a little empathy. I was like, oh, really? So that it takes that long to do that? Wow, that's crazy, and really just empathizing with them. And I don't think it was something they were used to seeing. And so what it did was really just help them see me as someone who was kind of there to help them and really connect with them. So after a couple of those conversations with different management, I think they kind of relaxed a little bit. I think they understood that I was there for a reason and I'm doing my job and that I was really there to help. And I don't think anyone had really even asked them their opinions before that either. So it really flipped the dynamic. The walls came down. They realized I wasn't the enemy. And they actually were able to leverage my support to get some resources that they needed to help with some of their own pain points. So even as we got to the point of developing action plans and coming up with strategy on how to resolve some of the concerns that we had, we were able to structure it in a way that they didn't get necessarily penalized, but they got recognized for their efforts. But we were able to shed some light on some of their challenges to help them. So they actually ended up thanking me, thanking us for being there. We, got invited out to drinks, all the things. So it was definitely a turn from how it began.
Internal audit is technical, but it's also deeply human. Chad Bourque understands that part of the job better now than he did at the beginning. He's the Global Director of Enterprise Risk Management at Gallagher Benefit Services. But when he talks about resistance, he doesn't make himself sound fearless. He says the honest thing.
I think ultimately just like starting off going into the conversation, knowing they're going to be resistant, I think is part of that too. Like we have to be prepared for that at all times. And that was something I learned over the career. That wasn't like that day one. And I had to battle with it a lot because I'm one of those people that I like everybody to like me. And so having to deal with the resistance can be tough.
That's the part people don't always say out loud. It can be hard to be in a profession where your job is to challenge, question, and sometimes tell people something they don't want to hear. So the question becomes, how do you make the room feel less defensive before the finding ever arrives? Aadesh Gandhre is the Chief Audit Executive at DTCC. He says it starts by changing the shape of the conversation.
I think it starts with having the two-way communication. So what I've seen some people do is, let's say you go to a continuous monitoring meeting, it's your relationship meeting with the auditees. They keep the whole focus in the meeting asking questions. And then that almost has this feeling as an auditee that I'm being interrogated, right? So but if you open that communication channel and give them something in that meeting where, hey, you know what, I saw this in the other group that you might benefit from, go ahead and talk to this person X, Y, and Z, because we in internal audit have that amazing position in the firm to have that bird's eye view and connect the dots. So give them something in these meetings so that they look forward to it and it doesn't feel like an interrogation. And that's how you kind of move from that policing to the partnering, kind of remove the resistance. And it takes some practice to do it. I know for some it may not come naturally, but if you start showing that auditing is not just we asking question, or it's the hindsight, we're going to look at data from the last 1 year, what is that foresight that you can provide, that's really going to help you move away from that perception, because perception can still soon become reality.
Nam Pho Ho, former chief audit executive at Glencore, would say that is exactly why emotional intelligence matters. And his view of the profession is simple. Internal audit is a people business.
The power distance in South America is quite high. So the authority is centralized and the authority is not challenged. And this often also means that when you come from the headquarters as an internal auditor, you are really perceived as the police role. And people are a little bit afraid of you. So to navigate this, we had a big audit in South America. I went there and I personally met the CEO of that operation, along with my audit manager, to have an open discussion about the scope and any concerns regarding the risks associated with the scope. So I was surprised. The CEO was quite talkative, and surprisingly, he also revealed some important areas we should look for. So later during the audit, we addressed the areas he pointed out, and we had to expand and pivot a bit the scope to address his concerns. Then in the exit meeting, he was there as well. We discussed his concerns, we reviewed the findings, and shared our opinion how to rectify the issues. So later, my team told me, Nam, normally the CEO wouldn't attend the exit meeting. He would delegate to the CFO, and normally the meeting lasts 3 hours. It's a lot of discussion because of the cultural effect in this region. They like to discuss. But this time it was like 1 hour, and the CEO himself was there. So I think because we could connect with him early and align our scope and address his concern, he was interested to participate. And he was pleased with the result.
But even when you try to do it right, the conversation can still break. Because audit findings do not land in a vacuum. They land on people. People with pressure, pride, deadlines, and sometimes problems you can't see from across the conference room table. Ashanti learned that early in her career during a closeout meeting that didn't go the way she expected.
Yeah, this is always, it's never fun to deliver negative audit findings. I'm even hesitant to share this, but I'm going to share it with tag to change the names and everything, because it did become sort of the thing I was known for some time in my career, because it did happen early on in my career, but some of my colleagues will never let me forget it. But anyway, because it did not land well, just spoiler alert. But so we started an audit as normal as we've always done. We review all the policies, review all the information we can, even before talking to the auditee. And then once we get there, we do the walkthroughs and allow them to kind of give us their perspective of the process. And so in this particular case, after that had been done, I had specifically discovered that a part of the process that they had presented was not being completed. There was no documentation to support it. And based on what I was seeing, it was going to be an exception. And so this probably was also one of those situations where the auditee was not fond of us being there. This was early in my career, so I was young, coming into her area. She felt like I was, just there to make trouble. So throughout the course of the audit, she had been very matter of fact, very short. So I kind of didn't feel good about it at this point because I didn't feel like it was going to help the situation at all. So anyway, we get to the closeout meeting and I'm presenting these exceptions. And I'll be honest, they weren't egregious. It wasn't anything that I felt like was going to fail the audit or anything. But nonetheless, it was an exception, right? So I, thinking I was doing the right thing, was approaching the conversation pretty much with the same energy that she had given us the whole audit. She had been very matter of fact, so I was very matter of fact. She had been very straightforward with us, very straight, short to the point. So that's how I presented the information. These are exceptions. This is what we found. It wasn't being done. Let's talk about it. And so the next steps was we had to develop an action plan to address those exceptions. So as I started asking her, do you have any thoughts on what may have caused these exceptions and how you think we could address them, so we can develop some sort of corrective action? This woman begins to cry. She is sitting there. We are all there in the room, my management team, her management team, around the conference room table. And she starts to cry and it wasn't like a sobbing cry, like a verb, like you could hear her crying, but you could visibly see the tears falling from her eyes. And she was trying to, talk through them. And so I had to work through, because I'm not sure. I'm like, I don't know what to do. Do I hug her? Do I get her tissue? Like, we're in an audit. So up until this point, she hadn't necessarily shown any emotion other than very, just very dry and very straight to the point. So I was very taken aback. And of course, it was early in my career. I think her management ended up just kind of taking over the conversation and continuing to talk to me to work through the action plan. And so I think I left. So of course the saying goes, I made the woman cry, which that is not the case. So that's what my colleagues teased me about for years. But what I took away from that, I don't know what created the dynamic to make her emotional. But I just learned that, you just never know what people are going through. And I, it could have been mindful even in the beginning, understanding why she was being so short and dry. It could have been something personal. Who knows? Maybe she wished she could have been nicer at that point. I'm not sure. But that was one of the times that really sticks out to me because that was probably the biggest reaction I've ever gotten from delivering difficult negative audit findings.
Do you think you would have handled it differently now, or are you happy with how you handled it originally? Because I don't even know what you would do in that kind of setting.
I definitely think I probably would have gotten up and went around the table and hugged her or something now.
A finding may be accurate, the documentation might be missing, the exception may be real. But that moment reminded Ashanti that being right isn't the same thing as being heard. Chad's version happened in Mongolia at a mine site.
Typically, in an ideal world, you're constantly keeping your stakeholders involved in the process and they know everything that's going on and you're asking questions back and forth and you're really engaged. But there was a particular instance when it was one of these overseas trips. I was in Mongolia and we were working at a mine site. And so the the leader of the department we were auditing. We were auditing kind of a procurement function. The leader was somewhere else in the region. And so he wasn't involved really at all in the process. And I was like a fairly junior new manager at the time. And we did everything right. We did the project. The stakeholder was there, like the process owner was there through the whole thing. We talked about the finding. He knew what was there, and we followed the process by the book. But the process has us sending our summary of findings to a lot of stakeholders, including CFOs and things like that. And when we did that, there were some findings that were not very pretty, and they were negative on his team. And he went off pretty hard. I had never had anyone curse at me in an internal audit situation, but yeah, on our findings like call towards the end of the project, there were words spoken. Luckily, I had a great director at the time who kind of just put the pause on it and said, "Let's stop. We're going to step away, give you some time to cool off, send us the evidence of what you disagree with." And we actually went back. I had to go back to Mongolia to do more testing and more work. And we ended up with the same conclusions. But it was a difficult situation for me because I'd never had anything like that happen to me before. But yeah, that is another example of like how important it is to have a strong leader and be a strong leader for your team members.
Jez Gill had another. She's now a senior manager of internal audit and assurance at RELX. But early in her career, she walked into a closing meeting with a significant finding.
We were in Sweden and we were about to enter an internal audit closing meeting. And I found a significant finding, sort of a red-rated finding. And essentially, if that had been accepted by the stakeholder, it could possibly have resulted in a big reorganization, which obviously the stakeholders didn't want. And when I turned up to that meeting, it couldn't have gone any worse. The stakeholder got up out of his chair and he stormed out of the office. And then I was sort of, a newbie in the profession. I didn't really know what to do. I was there on my own. I sort of got up and I looked around the office for him and he was nowhere to be seen. So I just thought, okay, sort of borderline panicked, not really sure what to do. So I went back to the hotel and then that evening I put together a strategy in terms of, okay, what am I going to do to fix this problem? And what if I never see him again and don't get to communicate my findings? So the next morning, I put in another meeting request with him. And I just basically, it's honestly the bit about communication. I put myself in his shoes. I wanted him to see who the person was behind the email address. I'm not just an auditor. I'm not a robot. I have a personality behind my email address, behind my name. Who am I? And why do I care? And for him, I really needed to communicate that to him. What is the so what? So what I'm saying to you as a recommendation, why does it matter to him? And I think, in my opinion, this is where a lot of internal auditors get it wrong. They fail to communicate the so what. And then as a result of that, he was a completely different man. And then I flew back to London. And then he actually sent a email to my then line manager. And he basically said, Jaz is a keeper. I think she's a brilliant auditor, which was real kudos because it was my first internal audit role. And the fact he went out of his way to provide that unsolicited feedback was just a little bit of a kind of positive feedback to me in terms of, yeah, I did the right thing and I handled that difficult stakeholder in a really good way. And it really set me up for success in dealing with difficult stakeholders moving forward.
That was her first role. 15 years later, she still uses the same approach.
I have quite a lot of examples over the last 15 years of when I've had to deliver difficult audit messages. But again, my strategy has always been the same. It's understanding, putting yourself in the stakeholder shoes, understanding the ramifications on their end of receiving those audit findings, and then thinking, okay, what can I do to soften that impact in terms of, okay, this is why it matters. This is why it makes your job easier moving forward. This is how your risks will be remediated moving forward. If an auditor is able to explain it in that way, it really resonates with stakeholders because they understand why it matters to them and not why it just matters to the auditor.
In other words, the finding is only half the work. The other half is helping someone understand why it matters to them. So what do you do when the human side of this work shows up? Aadesh has a name for one of the traps auditors fall into when the work gets tense.
It's a phenomenon called falling in love with your finding. I've seen it with some of the auditors who get so hung up with this is what I found, and then they're going to ignore everything around it. And when you go with that attitude, of course you're going to hit the wall with your auditees. So we also need to figure out how are our auditors carrying that message forward, and are we listening? I think listening is a key skill when you feel like you've hit a wall with your stakeholder. And it may not be just your auditee, it could be, let's say, somebody on the board, it could be somebody on the regulatory side. I think you have to just take a step back and figure out why this may be happening, and then listen more. That active listening is a key skill in here.
Asim Fareeduddin thinks that work starts before the meeting even begins. He now heads internal audit and assurance at RELX. And when he meets a stakeholder for the first time, he does a little homework.
I'll give you my secret sauce here. So I think if I'm meeting somebody for the first time, as a stakeholder, immediately I'll go onto LinkedIn and see what their background is. And when we had that first meeting, I try to see something that we may have in common, whether it's an experience or maybe we have a connection in common that's at a different company. But I try, or maybe they're in Lake Mary, Florida, and I'm from Florida, so we build a common ground on that, right? So I think finding something in common helps to break barriers and build that relationship, because there is skepticism, where maybe an auditor may have been seen as the police, or maybe auditors are seen as being robots, right? So I think if you can build that relationship, you build that trust. And I think that's really helpful in, meeting your objectives. So the second, maybe more specific example around, work product. I think if a business is having an issue and we're proposing a solution, and coming in as a solution provider. Maybe it's a new implementation, or maybe there's a compliance obligation somewhere where we as auditors can be viewed as an expert in risk and control. Will help show the value as an advisor. We understand maybe that regulation. I think going back many years to SOX, the first year of SOX internal audit was seen as the expert, because it was a new regulation and we were the expert in controls. I think you can extrapolate that to GDPR or any other privacy or financial or security regulation out there, right? We're helping the business navigate this regulation.
That is the invisible craft of internal audit. Not just knowing the risk, not just knowing the control, but knowing how to create enough trust for the conversation to happen. And sometimes trust comes from showing up as exactly who you are.
So I wanted to talk about the concept that I think we've all heard about bringing your whole self to work. So I have an interesting example where it actually worked to my benefit, after some initial apprehension. So I was going to meet one of our senior leaders in our organization for dinner, and I needed to pick them up as they had flown in from out of town. And I'm really into cars, and I have a sports car, so I was a little hesitant in picking up a leader in this smaller sports car. So I had asked my wife the night before, "Hey, can I take your, cushy SUV?" And she said, "Sure." Well, right before I was about to leave, there was an issue, and I had to take my sports car, and I was again a little bit nervous. So I pull up to the hotel where I had to meet the senior leader, and she comes out and says, "Wow, I love your car, and I used to have a similar car as well." And we ended up going to dinner and talking about cars for the majority of the conversation. Oh, we did talk about a little bit of work, and to me it was an interesting lesson. It helped me build that relationship, and you know make a more authentic relationship, and maybe break down some walls or barrier where I might not have been able to. And now we have a great work relationship, and on the side we chat about cars and trade pictures of cars and stories. So I think it's fascinating. It just goes to show you, be courageous a little bit, and really bring your authentic self to work, whatever that may be. You don't realize who you'll meet, and what interests they may have, and what that may do for your relationship.
He texts her pictures of the cars now. That may sound small, but it's not. That's a real relationship, and real relationships change the way hard conversations happen. Internal audit is often associated with what it finds wrong, but at its best, it also helps organizations see what is possible. Nam saw that during one of the hardest moments of his career.
So back in 2016, the mining industry where my company was experienced a rapid drop in commodity prices. Due to a market oversupply, all the major companies were producing too much commodities in the past, and now the demand is not there, so the prices are dropping. So of course, sales, profits, and share price took a huge hit. So this kind of storm is something every organization will encounter one or the other day, right? Because the world is changing. So during such time, you have to understand that senior management tends to focus heavily on reviewing costs and cutting costs. And the fastest way to do it is by looking at how can you reduce headcounts, because that's a major contributor to costs. So I remember one day being called into the office by the CEO, by the group CEO, to discuss. He wants to discuss about headcounts and if we can reduce it. So that's not a very comfortable situation you want to be, right? But I think I prepared my whole life for this situation, and the preparation, it's called resilience, right? I knew one day it's going to come. I knew one day we're going to have a discussion like this. So during the conversation, I was gambling a little bit, and I was playing a high stake. I was able to share to him, don't look at internal audit as a cost factor. Look at internal audit something we can support you reviewing the identification of cost savings. And I convinced him that our department can at least save 80 million US dollar. So how do I came to this figure? I said, look, I have 40 members at that time, and everyone will help saving 2 millions through cost reviews and of course through the recommendations we're gonna make. So at least he was not happy, but at least he wasn't object, and he said, yeah, I mean, let's have a try. And of course he wants to see the proof. 1 year later, we helped the company reducing working capital by 400 million. So the starting point was 2.2 billion we have in terms of spare parts, and we could reduce it to 400 million. The potential was even 600 million, but the remaining 2 million, management didn't implement these cost reduction initiatives. But with our recommendations, we reduce the company inventory but it's spare parts. It's spare parts, but consumables as well by 400 million. And you can even verify it. If you look at the annual report for 2017 and compare 2016, you can see how it dropped from 2.2 to 1.8 billion. So this achievement, of course, didn't go unnoticed in the company. So in fact, after the business is starting to look at the different eyes, they see, hey, they are not just the checklist and compliance folks. They can actively addressing major business issues. So we are not just ticking the box anymore. Instead, we are seen as valuable contributors to a business priority. So this shift transformed us really from being, I say, the hunted for savings to the hunters uncovering new opportunities for cost efficiency.
And maybe that is the biggest point of Internal Audit Awareness Month. Success in this profession doesn't always look like applause. Sometimes it looks like raising your hand before you feel ready.
I was courageous enough to take on a project which was not even my responsibility, but it was really about coming up with a new audit universe management and risk assessment engine for the whole audit department. This is when I was in Goldman Sachs. I was a business liaison, and my role was to be the translator of business requirements from audit to our technology department. And there was a need to revamp our risk assessment engine. And for some reason, our technology team did not have the appropriate resources to do this in the time that we needed that in. And I raised my hand. I was missing, coding at the time anyway, with my background as computer scientist. So I said, I'm going to give it a shot and see what happens. And I kid you not, there was a weekend where I may have slept 4 hours. But I was just working right from the design to the implementation, and not just create a POC, but then that ended up being the production application that we used, and we named it Aura, which is Audit Universe and Risk Assessment. So, pretty much when I left Goldman, I left my Aura behind. And this is one of those things that not only gave me the confidence I needed, because early on I used to be a very shy person with my cultural upbringing and do not interrupt anybody, blah, blah, blah. But because of the courage I shown then and the response that I got from the management after the successful implementation, after that, I feel my career just took off. And, that's an example that I'm extremely proud of. And I have shared that story with some of the junior team members that, be courageous, even if you feel that you may not be able to do it, raise your hand, give it a shot, and maybe see the magic happen.
For Aadesh, success started with courage. For Ashanti, it looks more like commitment.
So I'll just say my professional success story, and having been with this company for almost 20 years, have we hit bumps in our relationship? Yes. Have I always agreed with everything they've done? No. Have we both experienced change over the almost 20 years? Absolutely. I have way more kids than I had when I started. They make way more money in revenue than they did when I started. But here we are. And I think the message is because through all of the change, which, in internal audit, our umbrella, there's so much more under our umbrella now, 20 years later, than there was when I started. Technology, I don't even have to mention those two words of artificial intelligence and how technology has changed, which impacts the change in our risk landscape and our risk environment. And even the workforce is changing. Like, working from home was not something that we were doing 20 years ago. But one thing has remained the same. We value each other. My company values me and I value them. So being with the same company for 20 years, I think, is a success story, especially for my generation. And people who know me know that I'm very strategic. I am a forward thinker. So to know that I've stayed committed to this organization for this long must mean that there has been value here and that they have been reciprocal in this relationship. And because they see my value, I continue to work diligently to ensure the company maintains the trust of its customers and its community and its employees as well. So what I would hope that story says to internal auditors is that this is not just a job, but it really is a mission to provide confidence to our organizations that we have a mutually invested interest in their success.
That mission is what keeps the work from becoming just another audit report. It asks a harder question. Did this work add value? For Chad, that's the question auditors should ask for every project.
So when you think about that, what I would say is every audit you do or every project you do, reflect afterwards and say, what value did I add? And if you can answer it, fantastic. Save it for the next conversation you have with a leader. If you can't answer it, then get your root cause, your 5 why analysis out and talk about, well, why didn't we add value this time? Because you can learn from that and add value the next time. We should always be thinking about how we're adding value to our organization. And if we follow that purpose, we're golden. Everybody will be successful if they strive towards that focus or that purpose.
But for that value to change the way people see internal audit, it must be visible.
So one of the things that I've learned actually very recently in my professional career is no matter how good you are as an internal auditor, you can shout about your successes, you can deliver amazing audits. If it's not visible, you're probably not going to get the recognition and the kudos you need. And what I've seen over the last 15 to 20 years is internal auditors, they're generally not very good about talking about their successes. And this is particular to women as well. I've seen it slightly skewed that way. So I would say to any auditors listening and to any females out there, please do share your successes more and more because we do awesome work.
To celebrate Internal Audit Month, the IAA is offering members 20% off application and exam registration fees throughout the entire month of May. So if you're thinking about getting your CIA, CRMA, or IAP, now might be the best time. Becker, the official CIA exam review partner of the IAA, is offering up to 20% off CIA exam prep and $50 off IAP prep. You can find the code and link to this offer in the show notes of this episode. So don't wait too long because this offer ends May 31st.
If you like this podcast, please subscribe and rate us. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also catch other episodes on YouTube or at theiia.org. That's THEIIA.org.